Hello and happy gaming, everybody. My name is Dark Sage Walker, and I'm finally back with the next tier list in my One Step from Eden series. Today we're going over the Doublelift spells, so before I get into the actual list, I just wanted to say real quick, I apologize for how long it took for me to get this up and running. It's been a little while since I did the last one, and the only reason why this one took so long is because we were moving house, getting things unpacked and set up, getting my brain in order, because apparently I have no idea what's going on in my head anymore. But oh yeah, and the internet was delayed for about 6 days from when we thought it was going to be up and ready, so there was that whole drama. But now that we're back and everything is looking hunky-dory, now I can get back to a more reliable schedule. And that starts with doing the Doublelift tier list. So, for anyone who missed the other two tier lists, just a quick disclaimer, I do rate the spells as they exist in a bubble. That means that I rate them as they are, without taking synergies into account. That having been said, I do want to point out that there are some spells in the Doublelift category that absolutely do not work without anything else. So again, I will be bringing that up as time comes along. But enough stalling, let's get into this. So, we're going to start with Ambient Burst. Ambient Burst fires a shot for each spell cast this battle. So, it's one of those spells that functions particularly well in either a jam-focused or a kunai-focused deck, because you're just going to be spamming spells left and right. Now, that having been said, there is an issue with Ambient Burst that I want to bring out, and that's the idea that it also anchors you in place. And if your Ambient Burst is firing off a ton of missiles, that means you're going to be held still for an awfully long time. And that makes this spell very dangerous to use in longer fights. Now, you can get a lot to happen with this spell, but it's got just as big of a downside as well, so I am going to rate it at a B. It's a spell that has a very strong effect, but it also has a very strong drawback. I suppose if it didn't have the drawback, then the spell would just be infinitely spammable, so it's a spell that you take at your own risk. It's just, you gotta be careful of it, that's all. Next up is Deck Slam. I have a soft spot for Deck Slam, not even gonna lie. It only costs 2 mana, and it fires a shot that deals 10 damage for each spell in your deck. Now, I have a particular bias with Deck Slam, and that is that I tend to run large decks when I play. And you've seen me play, you've seen what I do with my decks, you've seen my videos on YouTube, hopefully, if not, please. But shameless self-promotion over. I find this spell to be incredibly effective. It's one shot, it travels very quickly, and let's say you've got 15 spells in your deck. That's 150 damage for 2 mana. And let's say that you have things that say add kunais or jams to your deck. Those are still counted as cards in your deck, or spells in your deck, I should say. And that means that Deck Slam can potentially do an awful lot of work. I would say even just in a vacuum, I would probably still rate it as an A, but I also have to now be aware of the idea that this spell isn't that great if you're running thin deck strategies. So, do I leave it as an A, or do I recognize my bias and drop it down to a B? I will be the judge of that later. Echo. So this is an interesting scenario, because according to my own rules, Echo is not a spell that works by itself. Echo is a spell that works by casting the last spell that you cast. So by definition, it does nothing when it's by itself. But I don't know of any starting deck that ever has no spells. Even Bullet Hell Gunner has Bomb Toss. So let's discuss Echo's merits without worrying about my normal rule for this one, since this one is a very special case. What Echo does, as I said, is it just casts the last spell cast. And Sorry, I'm getting completely ahead of myself. Here's why that's useful. Say you've got, oh, I don't know, a Fort spell, or Forte, however you want to pronounce that. Now, we all know that that spell consumes, and if you don't, well, you know now. So, here's why that's important, though. Sorry. You cast a spell that consumes. Alright. Then you cast Echo, which means you now have a second chance to cast that consumed spell. Furthermore, it casts the spell as it exists for you. So, let's say you've got... use the same Forte example, but you have double cast on it. Or, actually it would be more sense to say you've upgraded it so that it gets 20 bonus shield. The Echo version will also do 20 bonus shield. It's a very malleable, very effective spell. It only costs 2 mana, so no matter what the mana cost of what you cast before it, it will always cost 2. So, and again, I don't like the explosion spell, but say you have that in your deck and you want to use it twice, this is how you use it twice. I personally have nothing bad to say about Echo. I think it belongs up there. Fling. Cast the spell in the other spell slot and backfire. So to explain what the backfire keyword is, that just means that the spell in the other slot gets consumed when you cast this. So Fling has a few iffy uses. Probably the biggest and most important use of it is to cast a spell that you don't normally have enough mana for. But again, it's going to consume that spell. Now, if you don't have enough mana for it to begin with, that's fine. It just means that you got some benefit out of it. But if you do have the mana for it and you consume it, well, now you don't get to cast it anymore. And that's something to think about for spells like, just off the top of my head, Blizzard, Thunderstorm, any of those big spells that you would probably want to use Fling for on a low mana deck. As soon as you have more maximum mana, Fling loses just about all of its appeal. It doesn't have no use, so I'm putting it in C rank, but it does leave me a little confused. Gambit. This is a spell that I've actually never used, but I can imagine what it does, so here goes. Hit random enemy tiles for each spell in your deck. Instantly shuffle. This spell to me is just weird. Now, first of all, it's not a safe spell to use when you're trying to rescue a hostage. And whereas I can imagine it would probably be decent against, say, the Gate, I'm not sure how exactly it would function in any other fight. This is a spell that I just don't have enough information on, I'm sorry. Now, the effect in and of itself is iffy. And the idea that it instantly shuffles your deck means that if you keep drawing it, you can keep delaying cards that you really need. Again, I'm not going to say it has no use, but from what I'm imagining, that's what it would be. Someone please inform me of how Gambit works in the comments, though. I don't want to just leave it like that. I'm not trying to be rude about it, I've just never taken that spell and don't see the appeal of it. Next up we have, I'm going to go a little bit out of order. We've got Jam Cannon and Jam Slam over here. But neither of those function without jams, so here's Jam. What does Jam do? By itself, it does nothing. It anchors you in place for a little bit while it does nothing, and then it consumes itself. And it costs you 2 mana to do that. Obviously, this goes here. You don't want jams. But, and this is the distinction that I need to make with this, there are plenty of things out there that work with jams, including some artifacts. Things like gelatin and icing. Those things, oh, and there's also Meat Shield, which gives you shield when you consume a card. Pardon me. There's what is it, Card Thrower. Every time you consume a card, it does, I think, 20 damage to a random enemy. There are things to make jams worth it, but by itself, it belongs down there. Now, let's get into Jam Cannon. Jam Cannon, fire a shot for every jam in your deck. It anchors you, and you add 1 jam to your deck. So, thing about Jam Cannon, First, now in the Jam Cannon, Jam Slam, come on and slam and welcome to the jam. Yeah, you saw that coming. This one apparently costs nothing. Does 80 damage per jam in your deck, so even if you only have like 2 or 3 jams, this is still useful. And it adds a jam in and of itself, so anything else jam related gets boosted by this. My personal feeling on this is that this belongs up here. Obviously you don't want this if you don't have anything going on for jams. But if you do have a jam focused deck, and I would argue that Gunner's Mana Fire setup is a setup that's meant to use jams, then yes, you definitely want Jam Cannon. And while we're at it, let's talk about Jam Slam. It fires a shot 4 tiles away for every jam you've used in battle, and it adds 1 jam to your deck, so no matter what, it's making itself incrementally better as the fight goes on. Now, I've heard people describe essentially Jam Slam as being Jam Cannon except for a little bit worse. I think they have 2 slightly distinct functions. This Jam Cannon works better early in a fight. Jam Slam works better late in a fight. And again, if you've got something that interacts with cards that consume, you want those jams anyway. I believe there's also a relic called Blueberry Jam that makes your jams cost 1 instead of 2. I'd personally do something different with that and make jams cost 1, but that's neither here nor there. So with Come On and Slam here, what you want to do is use a bunch of jams, then use this to fire a bunch of shots after you've used a few jams. And this you preferably like to use after other things that add jams. And again, that all seems obvious, but I'm putting it out there just to kind of give my feeling on it. And my feeling is it belongs right up here with Welcome to the Jam. Matter of fact, because of that, Come On and Slam, Welcome to the Jam. Anyone else feel like watching Space Jam now? I don't, but that's because I'm a contrarian by nature, so ha! Put that in your pipe and smoke it. But these 2 spells work well together. This one works earlier in a deck and in a battle. This one works better later. I think they're both good, and they're both even better accentuated with another spell later on, but we're going to get to that. Just keep in mind that I find both of these spells equally useful. I'm a big fan of both of them. I like jam setups, so both spells may be being colored by my bias, but that's just where I'm going with this. Midnight. Oh boy, Midnight. I can't think of a single reason why you would ever use this spell, and why it's a Calamity rated spell, I'll never know. By the way, keep in mind that all Calamity rated spells have a circular border. Not only are they rainbow colored cards, but they have a circular border here, so remember that for later on. You consume all of your spells and cast them all at once, and then this consumes. I'm just gonna be real honest here. Who is this card for? Who is this card for? In what world do you want to take every spell you have, throw it all out there at once, which means a bunch of spells probably aren't even hitting your target if you're using it in a boss fight, and then afterwards you've got nothing. You're left with nothing because it consumes everything and casts it all at once. Who is this card for? First of all, it costs 6 mana. Most of the time when I'm playing, I cap myself at 5 maximum mana just because most of the spells I want to cast, I don't need more than 5 mana for. If there are no better relic options, I'll take more maximum mana than that, or if I'm trying to build up blue bullets. But this... No, I'm sorry. This spell is absolute garbage. If I were rating this alongside the Anima spells, I would say even Explosion has more of a use than this. I don't understand Midnight. Maybe there's like an infinite loop with it where you consume a bunch of spells and get a bunch of effects for it or get your spells back somehow, but I don't know of anything that exhumes your spells from the removed from game pile, or for those who play Magic the Gathering, from exile. but I just don't understand this spell. I don't know who it's for, I don't know who would cast it. It's a legit garbage spell. Preload. Reduce next shuffle time by 1 second. It costs 2 mana, and it actually does fire a shot that does 20 damage. It's apparently a legendary spell, which makes me go, how is this legendary? How? Now, granted, it's better than Midnight, so it's not going in D tier. But I don't understand what the hell this spell is all about. Actually, and again, I'm not going to say I don't know, because unlike Gambit, I've used this spell before. It just doesn't do enough for me to find it particularly worthwhile. So, putting it there. Oh, hello. Thank you. Thank you, Google Chrome. So, sorry if anyone out there really likes preload and they think that I'm just shitting on it. The fact of the matter is, I just don't really know who that spell is for. More often than not, your fights aren't going to be going on long enough for you to need to reduce your shuffle times. If you're running thin deck strats, sure, because your shuffle times get longer every time you perform a shuffle. But I just don't see it. Not for me, anyway. Now we've got 2 really good ones. Railgun and Skewer. And I'm gonna go over these in reverse order because one of these is essentially the other one but cast 3 times. So, and even that's not entirely true. Let me just explain. So we'll start with Skewer. Skewer fires a piercing laser. You add 1 jam to your deck. It costs 0 mana. It does 60 damage to the entire row nearly instantaneously. Now, yeah, you have to deal with a jam later, but do I need to say anything else? That's just amazing. If you've got an entire row of enemies that you need to mess up, that does the job so amazingly. I can't say enough good things about Skewer. And now Railgun. Railgun fires 3 piercing lasers, and you add 2 jams to your deck. Again, for 0, and it does 150 damage to the entire row. Now, obviously, it's not always useful against bosses, because bosses tend to do this thing that we like to call moving around to avoid damage, but it's still a huge amount of damage, and especially with upgrades, you can get upgrades for Railgun that let you fire 2 additional shots, or 4 with an additional jam. So for 0 mana, you're getting 7 times 50. It's 350 damage, potentially. It's too good to pass up. For 0 mana, I repeat, 0 mana! It's so good. So amazingly good. And I don't know what upgrades you can get for Skewer outside of the usual, but even just something like apply some poison on hit or just bonus damage, it all adds up. It costs nothing. You can use this card whenever. It's just amazing. I love that card. I love both of those cards. They're both amazing. They definitely belong in that S tier. They can go with anything. Sustain. Gain 1 Trinity. If Trinity is full, gain shield equal to the damage of the spell in the other slot. God, this one's awkward. So, this is obviously a Trinity-focused deck. This is a spell for a Trinity-focused deck, which automatically reduces its usefulness. But additionally, it also really only does anything if Trinity is full. The bonus is that it only costs 1. But on top of only doing something if Trinity is full, you also need a spell in the other slot that actually does damage for Sustain to do anything. So, I don't know, this is a very awkward card to gain shield with, and in comparison to other Trinity cards, I don't know, it doesn't do enough. I'm gonna put it down here just because it's convoluted. If it were a little bit easier to use, then I would say maybe put it up in the B rank, but as it stands, I almost never take Sustain. Not a big fan of it. No, sorry, Sustain. Besides, if you want shield out of a Trinity deck, I mean, you know, shields up, entrench, shield catch. You know, there's ways to get shield. What is this called? Switch Bait. Shots deal damage of the spell in the other slot. So this costs 2 mana, and this is another spell that absolutely does not function by itself. So I can't necessarily say, oh, I'm just going to put it down here because it doesn't function by itself. I can't do that with this spell. So here's the deal with this spell. It costs 2 mana, but it fires 2 shots. Just right off the bat, you're getting 2 shots for 2 mana. Now, think about any spell that you would pay 1 mana for to do like 40 to 60 damage. Or even Mini Thunder, which is just 40. For 2 mana, you get to do that damage twice. So, let's say you've got Thunder. Before you cast Thunder, I keep forgetting the name of this spell, I'm dumb. Switch Bait. Cast Switch Bait, and you can get 200 damage off that Thunder before you cast that Thunder. And let's say that you've done something particularly crazy, like put double cast on Switch Bait. Well, now you've got, potentially, using the Thunder example, 400 damage before you cast Thunder. See, now, the only reason why I'm putting it at A rank is because, again, this spell just doesn't function by itself. On the other hand, as soon as you have even a moderately damaging spell, this becomes amazing. It's also one of the few things that makes Explosion worth taking. 500 damage? Yeah, I don't really want to cast Explosion by itself, but I also took Switch Bait. 1000 damage for 2 mana! It doesn't get much better than that, but again, I'm putting it at A only because it does need something else to function. By itself, this spell costs 2 mana and does nothing. With something that doesn't do damage, it costs 2 mana and does nothing. The moment you get something that does damage, though, especially if it's something that you would normally pay 1 or 2 mana for in the first place, definitely worth it. As soon as you get to something that you would pay even more mana for, ooh, this spell can get damaging, especially if you can apply Fragile. Like, if you put the Fragility upgrade on Switch Bait, the first shot is going to add the Fragile. The second shot is going to do the extra damage and keep the enemy fragile. There's just too many good uses for this spell. Time Slow. Okay, so this is a spell that makes things like Minigun and Blue Bullets work, and Ambient Burst as well. Time Slow costs 1 mana and it just slows time for 3 seconds. This is more than enough time to line up a multi-shot attack. It's more than enough time to dodge something big that you're trying not to get killed by. Time Stop just does everything. It's one of the reasons why Chrono Saffron is damn near broken in my opinion. It's just a good spell. And despite what I said... Oh no, you can see the square border. Okay, so no, it's not a Calamity spell. Time Stop costs 2 mana and stops time for 3 seconds. Now, you are not stopped during this period, so if you look at your next list, you can keep casting spells while you have mana, so if you get Time Stop and then you've got like Minigun coming up right after, you can stop time, fire off the Minigun, and then as soon as time resumes, all of the shots fly out at once. Now, that having been said, I do think it's a little bit less useful than Time Slow, especially because it costs 2 mana. But it still has a very similar effect. You can still move. You can still throw out a couple of spells. You just have to be good with where your spells are going to be showing up in your cast slots. You can still do things with that spell. It's just a matter of getting them to work with the A, increased mana cost, and B, a little bit of the confusion of knowing where they're going to go because your interface doesn't change. Because it's technically frozen in time, and that's something that I think they need to change for that spell. Actually, you know what? I am going to put it down in B rank. It's one of those spells that I like it, but it has drawbacks that need to be fixed. Alright, we only got 3 spells left, and one of them is Trisect. This costs 2 mana and does 33 damage. Fire a laser beam. If Trinity is full, deal damage equal to 1/3 of the target's HP. Gain 1 Trinity, add 1 Jam. Now, this spell, It's really good for Trinity decks, obviously, but it also adds jam, so it's good for jam combos. And even just by itself, on that third casting, it does a ridiculous amount of damage. Like, let's say that your opponent has 2100 health left and you hit them with that third shot. That's 700 damage, no questions asked. It's just a good spell. This, now because it needs, because essentially it needs Trinity to be good, I'm gonna put it here. Now, by my normal rules, I would put it down in D, but I just don't feel it's a D-rated spell. I really do feel as though Trisect belongs up here. It doesn't belong in every deck, but is it good? Oh, you better believe your bollocks it's good. Unleash. You spend all your mana, you fire a shot for each mana spent, you add 1 jam to your deck. Now, it has a variable number of shots. It obviously just costs all of your mana, and then however much mana you spend, you get that number of shots that each do 70 damage. This spell is interesting. I don't think it's a bad spell, but I think it has enough downside to say that it doesn't belong in the A or the S rank. It's perfectly usable. It's just a shame that the best way to get it to work, which is either time slow or time stop, makes it so that you have less mana to spend on it. So let's say that we're at our max, at 5 max mana. We cast Time Slow before we cast Unleash. That means that you're getting 4 shots for 70 damage, and that equals 280 damage. It's not bad by any means. 280 damage isn't bad. What you got to ask yourself is it worth spending 4 mana for? Or do you know that you're going to be able to hit your opponent? It does require aiming. So you gotta keep that in mind. It's an interesting spell, but it's also a difficult spell to use. And lastly, we have Virus Spell. Fire a shot and duplicate this spell, and it anchors you for a short amount of time. So it costs 0 and does 20 damage. The whole reason why this spell exists is to continually copy other spell effects. And when I say spell effects, I guess what I mean is upgrade effects. So, let's say you put gain 10 shield on Virus Spell. When those Virus Spells come back around on the next shuffle, each of those Virus Spells is going to be adding 10 shield, or applying 10 poison, or just whatever it is that you would upgraded this spell to do. So, by itself, it's awkward. With upgrades, pretty good. And that is the list. Doublelift doesn't have as many spells as, say, Anima, but it's got enough, and what it has is generally either incredibly polarizing or just eh. So let me know what you guys think. As I said, if you have a different opinion, by all means, go ahead and display it in the comments. But be respectful about it. I love having conversations about this thing. If you guys have any ideas or uses for the spells that I didn't quite understand, by all means, bring it to my attention. I'm not going to yell at you for being like, oh, what do you think you are, better than me because you know about spells that I don't? I'm not trying to dunk on anyone. I legit want to learn. I'm still loving One Step from Eden. I'm still recording videos on it. And I would like to know as much as I can about the game. Especially if later on down the road the game gets updated, they add new stuff. I would love to know how the old stuff works before the new stuff comes out. So, all that having been said, thank you very much for watching. I open up the field for discussion and hope you guys have some interesting things to say. So, my name is Dark Sage Walker and I will be seeing you.